My brother handed me his phone during dinner and the text said, "If you look up from this screen, we both die tonight." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth, a piece of grilled salmon suspended in the air, while my brain tried to process the words glowing on the screen Liam had just shoved into my hand under the table. The text was from an unknown number, sent 3 minutes ago at 7:23 p.m. My hands started shaking, and Liam's knee pressed hard against mine under the white tablecloth, a warning to stay calm, to not react. I forced myself to take the bite of salmon, chewing mechanically, while my eyes stayed locked on the phone. Another text appeared as I watched. "Your brother witnessed something he shouldn't have. The man sitting 2 tables behind you, gray suit, is here to make sure neither of you leaves this restaurant alive. Read this carefully. Do exactly what I say. Do not look at him. Do not try to run. Do not call the police. Your server has been paid to poison your drinks within the next 10 minutes. When she brings the wine, do not drink it. Spill it. Make it look like an accident. You have one chance to survive tonight. My name is Owen Gallagher. I'm 26 years old. Until 3 minutes ago, I'd been having a perfectly normal Wednesday evening dinner at Belmont's, an upscale steakhouse in downtown Seattle, celebrating my brother Liam's promotion to senior architect at the firm where he'd worked for 4 years. Liam was 29, 3 years older than me, the responsible one who'd paid his way through architecture school, while I'd stumbled through a philosophy degree and ended up managing a bookstore. We were close despite our different paths, meeting for dinner every few weeks to catch up. Tonight had seemed like every other dinner we'd shared. Liam talking about his new project, designing a waterfront condo complex, me complaining about inventory management and difficult customers. Our mother had been supposed to join us, but had canceled at the last minute with a migraine. We'd ordered appetizers, made jokes about our father's terrible golf game, been completely normal siblings having a completely normal meal. And then Liam had gone pale, had stared at something over my shoulder, and had handed me his phone with hands that trembled slightly. I set my fork down carefully and reached for my water glass, taking a slow sip while keeping my eyes on the phone screen. Another text appeared. The man in the gray suit is named Victor Kelso. He's a professional. He won't shoot you in a crowded restaurant. He'll wait until you're isolated, probably in the parking garage. Your server, Danielle, doesn't know the drinks are poisoned. Someone in the kitchen added something to the wine bottle she's about to bring. You'll start feeling dizzy within minutes, confused and disoriented. Kelso will offer to help you to your car. You'll both be dead before you reach it. Your family will be told it was carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty exhaust system. I glanced at Liam without moving my head, just shifting my eyes to the side. His face was composed, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his knuckles were white gripping his own water glass. He'd already read these texts. He knew exactly how much danger we were in. I typed a response on his phone, keeping my movements small and natural like I was checking a message. "Who are you? Why are you helping us?" The response came within seconds. "I'm someone who wants Victor Kelso arrested more than I want you dead. Your brother saw something last Friday night that could put Kelso and his employer in prison. Kelso knows this. He's been tracking Liam for 3 days, waiting for the right opportunity. Tonight is that opportunity. I can get you out alive, but you need to trust me and follow instructions exactly." I showed the screen to Liam, tilting it just enough for him to read. His eyes scanned the text, and he gave the smallest nod. I typed again. "What did Liam see?" The response was immediate. "Not here. Too risky to explain now. You need to focus on surviving the next 20 minutes. Your server is approaching with the wine. Remember, spill it. Make it look accidental. Then excuse yourself to the bathroom. Both of you. Kelso won't follow you both into a public restroom. I'll meet you there with an exit strategy." Our server appeared at the table right on cue, a young woman in her mid-20s with short dark hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing the restaurant's standard black vest and white shirt. Her name tag read, Danielle. She smiled professionally and set a bottle of red wine on the table, showing Liam the label for approval. He nodded, and she began pouring, filling his glass first, then reaching across to pour mine. I watched her movements, looking for any sign that she knew the wine was dangerous, but she seemed completely normal, friendly, and efficient. She finished pouring and stepped back. "Can I get you gentlemen anything else right?" "Now?" Liam shook his head and thanked her. She walked away toward the kitchen. The wine sat in our glasses, dark red and innocent looking. I reached for my glass, making the movement look natural, bringing it toward my lips. Then I jerked my elbow deliberately against the edge of the table, sending the glass tipping sideways. Wine splashed across the white tablecloth, spreading in a crimson stain. I muttered a curse and grabbed my napkin, dabbing at the spill while apologizing. Liam reacted instantly, standing and saying we should clean this up, that he'd go get more napkins from the bathroom. I stood too, still holding the wine-soaked napkin, playing the embarrassed diner who'd just ruined the tablecloth. We walked together toward the back of the restaurant where the restrooms were located. I didn't look toward the man in the gray suit, but I felt his presence like a physical weight, imagined his eyes tracking our movement across the dining room. The bathroom was empty when we pushed through the door. Liam locked it behind us and immediately turned to face me, his composed expression finally cracking. "Owen, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they'd come after you, too. I thought if I just acted normal, if I pretended I hadn't seen anything, they'd leave me alone. I grabbed his shoulders. What did you see? What is this about? He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous gesture he'd had since childhood. Friday night, I was working late at the office, finishing renderings for the waterfront project. Around 11 p.m., I went outside to my car to get my laptop charger. The parking garage was empty, or I thought it was. I heard voices from the floor below, angry voices, so I looked over the railing. There were 3 men, and they were beating someone, just pounding on this guy who was already on the ground. I couldn't see faces clearly from that angle, but I could tell it was bad. Then one of them pulled out a gun and shot the guy on the ground. Just executed him. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just watched them wrap the body in something and load it into a van. I felt my stomach drop. Did they see you? Liam shook his head. I don't think so. I was a floor above them, and it was dark where I was standing. After they drove away, I went back inside and sat at my desk for an hour, trying to process what I'd witnessed. I knew I should call the police, but I was terrified. These weren't random criminals. They were too organized, too professional. I convinced myself that maybe I'd imagined it, that maybe the guy wasn't actually dead, that maybe calling the police would make me a target. So I went home and I tried to forget about it. He wiped sweat from his forehead. But on Saturday, I saw a news report. A body had been found in a construction dumpster near my office. The victim was identified as David Moreno, a federal prosecutor. The police were investigating it as a targeted killing, possibly related to cases he was prosecuting. I realized I'd witnessed a political assassination. The bathroom door handle rattled. We both jumped. A voice came from outside. It's me! Open the door! I recognized the voice as belonging to no one I knew. Liam looked at me, and I shook my head, uncertain. The voice came again. I'm the one who sent the texts. My name is Frank Nguyen. I'm a federal agent working undercover on the same case David Moreno was prosecuting before he was killed. Victor Kelso murdered him. Your brother witnessed the murder. Kelso has been trying to identify the witness for the past 3 days. He found your brother this morning. I need to get you both out of here before Kelso figures out you've made him and decides to act in the restaurant regardless of witnesses. Liam unlocked the door, and it opened to reveal a man in his early 40s, Asian American, wearing jeans and a dark jacket, with a badge clipped to his belt. FBI. He stepped inside quickly and locked the door again. Agent Nguyen pulled out his phone and showed us his credentials. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Frank Nguyen, assigned to the Organized Crime Task Force, 17 years of service. He pulled up photos on his phone, swiping through images of men in suits standing outside courthouses, surveillance photos of meetings, documentation that looked legitimate. David Moreno was prosecuting a case against Dominic Ferraro, who runs a criminal organization operating throughout the Pacific Northwest. Drug trafficking, money laundering, contract killings, extortion, the full enterprise. Moreno had evidence that would put Ferraro away for life. Ferraro ordered the hit. Victor Kelso executed it. Your brother saw it happen, which makes him the only witness to a federal prosecutor's murder. If Kelso kills him, the case against Ferraro collapses. I tried to process this, while my hands still shook from adrenaline. Why didn't you arrest Kelso before he got to us? You clearly know he's here. Agent Nguyen's expression was grim. Because I need him to lead me to Ferraro. Kelso won't act without orders. If I arrest him now for attempting to murder you, Ferraro goes underground and we lose our shot at the bigger case. I need your brother to testify about what he saw Friday night. I need to use that testimony to pressure Ferraro. But first I need to keep you both alive long enough to get you into protective custody. He pulled out a key card. There's a service exit behind the kitchen that leads to a delivery alley. My car is parked there. We're going to walk out through the kitchen, get in my car, and drive directly to the FBI field office. Once you're in federal custody, Kelso can't touch you. Liam asked the obvious question. What about our families? Our mother? Our sister? If Kelso knows who I am, he knows who they are. Agent Nguyen nodded. Already handled. I have agents picking up your mother and your sister right now. They'll be brought to a safe location. Your entire family will be placed in protective custody until we can arrest Ferraro and neutralize the threat. I wanted to believe him, but something felt wrong. If you're FBI, why did you send anonymous texts instead of identifying yourself immediately? Why did you let us sit there with a poisoned bottle of wine for several minutes before warning us? Agent Nguyen's jaw tightened. Because I don't know who in the restaurant is working with Kelso. The wine was poisoned by someone in the kitchen, which means Kelso has at least one person on staff. If I'd approached your table openly, I would have blown my cover and potentially triggered Kelso to act immediately. The texts kept you calm and gave me time to position myself for extraction. It made sense logically, but my instincts screamed that something was off. I looked at Liam, who seemed to be wrestling with the same doubt. Agent Nguyen checked his watch. We need to move now. Kelso will have noticed you've been in the bathroom too long. He's going to start wondering what's happening. He opened the door slightly, checked the hallway, then gestured for us to follow. We walked behind him through the restaurant's back corridor, past storage rooms and a door marked employees only, into the kitchen. Staff were busy preparing dishes, barely glancing at us as we passed. Agent Nguyen pushed through a metal door at the back, and we found ourselves in a dimly lit alley that smelled of garbage and grease. A dark sedan was parked 20 feet away, engine running. Agent Nguyen walked toward the car and I followed, but Liam grabbed my arm. His face was pale in the weak light from the security lamp above the door. "Owen, wait. Something's not right." Agent Nguyen turned back toward us, his hand moving toward his jacket, not toward his badge, toward something else. "Gun." I shoved Liam sideways, just as Agent Nguyen pulled out a weapon, not FBI issued, and fired. The shot went wide, hitting the brick wall behind where we'd been standing. We ran, sprinting back toward the kitchen door. Another shot rang out, impossibly loud in the enclosed alley. I felt something tug at my jacket, but didn't stop to check if I'd been hit. We burst through the kitchen door, and staff scattered, shouting. I grabbed a metal rack and pulled it down behind us, creating an obstacle. Liam was already running through the dining room toward the front entrance. I followed, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might explode. We made it to the front of the restaurant and pushed through the glass doors into the street. People were staring, alarmed by two men running from a restaurant like their lives depended on it, which they did. I looked back and saw Agent Nguyen, or whoever he really was, emerging from the restaurant behind us. His face was cold, professional, calculating, not FBI, not trying to help us, part of the threat. We ran down the sidewalk toward the parking garage where we'd left our cars. Stupid decision, isolated location, perfect place for an execution. But we weren't thinking clearly, just running on pure survival instinct. We reached the garage, and I grabbed Liam, pulling him toward the stairwell instead of the elevator. We took the stairs 2 at a time, climbing to the 3rd floor where my car was parked. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the fob to work. The car beeped, and we threw ourselves inside. I started the engine and reversed out of the spot too fast, tires squealing. As we accelerated toward the exit ramp, I saw 2 figures emerge from the stairwell. One was the fake Agent Nguyen. The other was a man in a gray suit, Victor Kelso. They'd been working together the whole time. The texts hadn't been a warning. They'd been part of the trap. Get us isolated in the bathroom, convince us to leave through the back exit, execute us in the alley where there were no witnesses. We'd only survived because Liam had trusted his instincts at the last second. I drove with no destination. In mind, just putting distance between us and the restaurant. Liam was on his phone, actually calling 911 this time. He reported an attempted murder, gave our location, described what had happened. The operator asked us to stay on the line and said police units were being dispatched. I kept driving, heading toward the interstate, checking the rearview mirror constantly for any sign of pursuit. Liam's hands were shaking worse than mine. "Owen, they're going to keep coming. They're not going to stop until I'm dead. The only way I survive this is if I testify, if I help put these people in prison." But I didn't get a good look at their faces. I saw 3 men in a dark parking garage killing someone. I can't identify them in a lineup. My testimony is useless. I thought about that while navigating traffic on I-5, heading south with no real plan. You said there were 3 men. If Kelso was one of them, and fake Agent Nguyen was another, who was the third? Liam closed his eyes, trying to remember details from 5 days ago. I don't know. It was dark. I was too far away. All I know is what I heard and what I saw in general terms. 3 figures, 1 gunshot, body wrapped and removed in a van. He opened his eyes. But I did see the van clearly when it drove past beneath me. It was white, commercial vehicle, had a logo on the side. Some kind of cleaning company. I remember thinking it was ironic, using a cleaning van to dispose of a body. I didn't think to memorize the company name at the time because I was in shock. That was something. Not much, but something. If the FBI could track down white cleaning vans in the area, cross-reference them with companies that might have connections to Dominic Ferraro's organization, they might be able to identify the third man and link all of them to the murder. We needed to get to actual FBI agents, real ones, not fake ones trying to kill us. I took the next exit and headed toward the FBI's Seattle field office, which I knew was located downtown, based on news reports I'd seen over the years. The 911 operator was still on the line, and Liam asked her to contact the FBI to tell them we were witnesses to a federal prosecutor's murder and that we were being hunted by a contract killer named Victor Kelso. We arrived at the FBI field office 20 minutes later, a modern building with security barriers and armed guards. I parked illegally right in front and we ran to the entrance, where we were stopped by security. Liam tried to explain the situation, but his words came out jumbled and frantic. The guard called someone on his radio, and within 3 minutes, we were being escorted inside by 2 actual FBI agents who'd been working late. They introduced themselves as Special Agent Linda Kovac and Special Agent James Rourke, both assigned to the Organized Crime Task Force. They took us to a conference room and listened while we described everything. The dinner, the text messages, the fake Agent Nguyen, the attempted murder in the alley, Victor Kelso, and most importantly, what Liam had witnessed Friday night in the parking garage. Agent Kovac, a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, took detailed notes while Agent Rourke, younger and more intense, pulled up files on a laptop. After we finished talking, Agent Kovac said 3 words that changed everything. Frank Nguyen's real. She turned her laptop toward us, showing an official FBI personnel file for Special Agent Frank Nguyen, Organized Crime Task Force, exactly as he'd claimed. The photo matched the man who'd tried to kill us in the alley. Agent Rourke leaned forward. Agent Nguyen has been undercover for 6 months, trying to infiltrate Dominic Ferraro's organization. If he pulled a gun on you, it was either because his cover was blown or because he's turned. We need to figure out which. My brain couldn't process this. He tried to murder us. He shot at us. He was working with Victor Kelso. Agent Kovac's expression was troubled. Victor Kelso is on our watch list, known associate of Ferraro, suspected in multiple contract killings, but never charged due to lack of evidence. If Agent Nguyen was with Kelso, that suggests his undercover operation had progressed further than we knew. He might have been ordered to help eliminate you as a test of loyalty, but it's also possible he was trying to scare you into federal custody, that the shooting was staged to make it look real to Kelso. Agent Rourke added, undercover work requires agents to commit minor crimes to maintain cover. Sometimes the lines blur. We need to bring Agent Nguyen in for debriefing to determine what actually happened tonight. They put us in protective custody immediately, housing us in a secure facility downtown while they investigated. Over the next 48 hours, we learned more about the case against Dominic Ferraro. David Moreno had been prosecuting Ferraro for racketeering, building a case based on testimony from multiple witnesses and financial evidence showing money laundering through legitimate businesses. Ferraro had ordered the hit to eliminate the prosecutor and send a message to other witnesses. Victor Kelso had carried out the execution with assistance from 2 other members of the organization. Agent Nguyen had been undercover as a mid-level associate in Ferraro's network, working his way up through the ranks by handling low-level criminal activity. When Ferraro ordered him to help eliminate the witness who'd seen Moreno's murder, Nguyen had faced an impossible choice: blow his cover by refusing, or help commit murder to maintain it. Agent Kovac interviewed us separately and together, going through every detail of Friday night, Wednesday night, trying to build a timeline and identify inconsistencies. She showed us hundreds of photos, asking if we recognized anyone as the 3rd man in the parking garage. None of them looked familiar to Liam. She brought in a specialist to work with, Liam on reconstructing details about the white van he'd seen. Through careful questioning, Liam remembered the logo had been blue and white, possibly with a phone number. The specialist compiled a list of cleaning companies in the Seattle area with matching descriptions. There were 38 possibilities. On the 3rd day of protective custody, Agent Kovac told us Agent Nguyen had been arrested. They'd tracked him to a warehouse outside the city where he'd been meeting with Ferraro's associates. Nguyen had initially claimed everything he'd done Wednesday night was part of his undercover operation, that he'd been trying to extract us safely while making it look like an elimination attempt to satisfy Ferraro. But evidence contradicted his story. Surveillance footage from the alley showed him firing his weapon directly at us, not past us or into the ground as a warning. Ballistics analysis showed he'd fired 3 shots, at least 2 aimed to kill. Phone records showed calls between Nguyen and Kelso coordinating our surveillance. Financial records showed a payment of $50,000 deposited into an offshore account Nguyen controlled 3 days after Moreno's murder. Agent Nguyen had turned. He'd become part of the criminal organization he was supposed to be investigating. The revelation sent shockwaves through the FBI's Seattle office. An agent going rogue was rare, but not unheard of. The money, the power, the adrenaline of undercover work sometimes corrupted people. Agent Nguyen had been undercover for 6 months with minimal supervision, making autonomous decisions, committing crimes with the understanding they'd be overlooked later. Somewhere along the way, he'd crossed a line from pretending to be a criminal to actually being one. When Ferraro ordered him to help eliminate the witness to Moreno's murder, Nguyen had agreed not to maintain cover, but because he'd become a genuine part of the organization. The texts he'd sent us hadn't been warnings. They'd been psychological manipulation designed to make us trust him, to make us leave through the back exit where we could be killed away from cameras and witnesses. Victor Kelso was arrested 4 days later at a motel near the Canadian border, attempting to flee the country. He was charged with the murder of federal prosecutor David Moreno, conspiracy to commit murder against Liam and me, and multiple counts related to his work as a contract killer for organized crime. The arrest came after FBI agents traced the white van Liam had seen to a commercial cleaning company that was a front operation for Ferraro's money laundering. The 3rd man in the parking garage was identified as Russell Dante, the owner of the cleaning company and a high-level associate in Ferraro's organization. Dante was arrested along with Kelso, and both men were offered plea deals in exchange for testimony against Ferraro and Agent Nguyen. The legal proceedings took months. Liam testified before a grand jury about what he'd witnessed Friday night in the parking garage. His testimony, combined with evidence from Kelso and Dante's plea deals, financial records, phone intercepts, and surveillance footage, built a comprehensive case against both Dominic Ferraro and Frank Nguyen. Ferraro was charged with ordering the murder of a federal prosecutor, racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. Nguyen was charged with corruption, attempted murder, conspiracy, and violations of his oath as a federal agent. Both cases went to trial within a year. I attended Nguyen's trial with Liam, sitting in the gallery and watching the man who'd tried to kill us defend himself. His attorney argued that Nguyen had been trying to protect us, that his undercover operation required him to appear complicit in criminal activity, that the shooting in the alley had been intentionally misdirected to scare us into protective custody without actually harming us. But prosecutors presented the surveillance footage frame by frame, showing Nguyen's gun aimed directly at Liam's center mass when he fired. Ballistics experts testified that the shots would have been fatal if they'd connected. Phone records showed Nguyen coordinating with Kelso before and after the attempted murder, discussing payment and disposal methods. The offshore account with $50,000 was traced to a payment structure used by Ferraro for contract killings. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all major charges. The judge's expression during sentencing was severe. Frank Nguyen had betrayed his oath as a federal agent, had attempted to murder 2 innocent civilians, and had corrupted the justice system from within for personal profit. Nguyen was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole before serving at least 25 years. His FBI credentials were revoked, his law enforcement pension forfeited, and his name added to a database of corrupted agents that would follow him forever. Dominic Ferraro's trial was longer and more complex, involving dozens of witnesses and thousands of pages of evidence. Liam's testimony about witnessing Moreno's murder was crucial, but not sufficient on its own. The prosecution built a comprehensive case showing Ferraro's organization had operated for 15 years, generating approximately $200 million in criminal proceeds through drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and extortion. The murder of David Moreno had been an escalation, an attempt to eliminate the prosecutor who'd finally assembled enough evidence to threaten Ferraro's empire. Victor Kelso and Russell Dante both testified against Ferraro as part of their plea deals, describing how they'd received orders to execute Moreno and later to eliminate the witness. The jury convicted Ferraro on 23 counts, including murder for hire, racketeering, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Victor Kelso received 25 years as part of his plea agreement. Russell Dante received 18 years. Both men would serve their sentences in high-security federal facilities, isolated from general population due to concerns about retribution from remaining members of Ferraro's organization. Our server from the restaurant, Danielle, was questioned but determined to be innocent. The wine had been poisoned by a kitchen employee who was on Ferraro's payroll, a man named Carl Simon who'd been paid $5,000 to add a drug to the bottle. The drug wouldn't have killed us immediately, but would have made us disoriented and vulnerable enough for Kelso to extract us from the restaurant. Carl was charged with conspiracy and attempted murder, eventually pleading guilty and receiving 8 years. The protective custody lasted 3 months. During that time, our mother and sister, who'd been brought in for protection the night of the restaurant incident, stayed with us in the secure facility. Our mother, Rebecca, was devastated by what had happened to us. Our sister, Claire, who was 23 and finishing her master's degree, treated the whole situation with a dark humor that helped ease the tension. She joked that at least the FBI safe house had better cable than her apartment. But beneath the jokes, we were all traumatized. The knowledge that we'd been minutes from death, that someone had planned our murder with methodical precision, that a federal agent had tried to kill us, left scars that would take years to heal. When protective custody finally ended after Ferraro's conviction, we returned to our lives forever changed. Liam left his architecture firm, unable to work in the building where he'd witnessed a murder. He moved to Portland and started a new practice focusing on residential design. I sold the bookstore and went back to school for a degree in criminal justice, inspired by Agent Kovach's work and disgusted by Agent Nguyen's betrayal. Our family became closer, having survived a crisis that could have destroyed us. We stopped taking safety for granted. Every dinner reservation, every parking garage, every stranger in a restaurant triggered a moment of hypervigilance that we'd learned to manage but never eliminate. I testified at a Senate hearing 3 years after the trials, speaking about the dangers of inadequate oversight for undercover operations. Agent Nguyen's corruption had been enabled by a system that allowed agents to work independently for extended periods without sufficient monitoring or psychological evaluation. I described how we'd trusted him because of his badge and credentials, how the system had failed to protect us from one of its own agents. The hearing led to reforms requiring more frequent check-ins for undercover agents and mandatory psychological screening every 3 months. 5 years after that Wednesday night dinner, I was working as a victim advocate for the FBI, helping other witnesses navigate the process of testifying in federal cases. I'd found purpose in the trauma, using my experience to support others facing similar circumstances. Liam had built a successful practice in Portland, was married, had a daughter he named Rebecca after our mother. We still met for dinner occasionally, though never at Belmont's. That restaurant had closed a year after the incident, unable to recover from the publicity surrounding the attempted poisoning and shooting. I thought about Agent Nguyen sometimes, wondered what moment had marked his transformation from law enforcement to criminal. Was it gradual, a slow erosion of ethics over months of undercover work? Or was there a specific decision point where he'd consciously chosen money and power over his oath? I'd never know. He'd declined interviews from prison, refused to participate in any studies about corrupt agents, apparently content to serve his sentence in silence. Victor Kelso and Russell Dante had both died in prison within 3 years of their convictions, one from cancer, one from violence by another inmate. Dominic Ferraro remained in high-security custody, aging in a cell and watching his empire dissolve as former associates turned on each other. The text message Liam had shown me that night was preserved as evidence in the trial. I'd seen it dozens of times during testimony and hearings. If you look up from this screen, we both die tonight. The words had been true in a way I hadn't understood at the moment. Looking up would have meant revealing we knew about the threat, would have triggered Kelso to act in the restaurant regardless of witnesses, would have escalated the situation before we had any chance to escape. The text had been psychological warfare designed to control our behavior, and it had almost worked. We'd survived not because of the warning, but because Liam had trusted his instincts when the fake Agent Nguyen tried to lead us into the alley. That split-second decision had saved both our lives. I kept a copy of the trial transcript in my office, referring to it sometimes when working with other witnesses who were struggling with fear or doubt about testifying. I'd show them the outcome, explain how justice had eventually prevailed despite corruption and violence. Some found it encouraging, others found it terrifying that the system could fail so badly. Both reactions were valid. The criminal justice system was imperfect, vulnerable to corruption, capable of causing immense harm even while pursuing justice. But it was also capable of self-correction, of holding its own members accountable, of protecting those who chose to speak truth despite enormous risk. 10 years after the restaurant, I received a letter from Victor Kelso's daughter, a woman named Emily, who'd been 14 when her father was arrested. She'd spent years processing what her father had done, the people he'd hurt, the lives he'd destroyed. She said she was sorry for the trauma he'd caused my family, that she didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted us to know that not all of his family supported his choices. I wrote back telling her that she bore no responsibility for her father's actions, that I hoped she'd built a life free from his legacy. She responded months later saying she was studying law, hoping to become a prosecutor, wanting to balance the scales her father had tipped toward criminality. The final epilogue came 12 years after that Wednesday dinner. I was at a coffee shop in Seattle when I saw someone familiar, a man in his mid-30s, slightly graying hair, sitting alone reading a newspaper. It took me a moment to place him. Russell Dante's son, Christopher, who'd been called as a character witness during his father's trial. He'd testified that his father had been involved in legitimate business, that the cleaning company was real, that he hadn't known about the criminal connections. I'd believed him at the time. Now, seeing him living a normal life while my family still carried the trauma of that night, I felt a surge of anger, but I didn't approach him, didn't confront him, didn't dredge up the past. I finished my coffee and left, acknowledging that some connections to that night would surface randomly throughout my life, that I'd have to choose each time whether to engage or move forward. Liam and I still talk about that night sometimes, usually late, after family gatherings when the kids are asleep and we're sitting on his porch looking at the Portland skyline. He'll say something like, "I still wonder what would have happened if I'd just ignored what I saw, if I'd gone home that night and convinced myself it was none of my business." I tell him the same thing every time, that doing the right thing almost got him killed, but not doing it would have let murderers escape justice and would have hollowed him out from the inside. He nods and we sit in silence, two brothers who survived something we shouldn't have, carrying forward with the weight of that survival balanced against the knowledge that justice, however imperfect and delayed, had eventually prevailed. The man who handed me his phone during dinner showed me that truth sometimes arrives in the form of impossible choices and cryptic warnings. That survival sometimes depends on trusting your instincts over authority figures with badges. That corruption exists even in institutions designed to protect us, and that bearing witness, even when it puts you in mortal danger, matters. The text said we'd both die that night. We didn't. Victor Kelso and Frank Nguyen are in prison. Dominic Ferraro will die behind bars. David Moreno's murder was avenged. Not a perfect ending, not without scars, but justice, earned through terror and testimony. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.